Welcome everyone to the bi-weekly Wednesday webinar. And tonight we're talking about group rides. No cyclists left behind, hot tips on forming or finding chill rides. Just so you kind of have a glimpse of what we're going to be doing in the coming weeks, I do this at the beginning of every one of our webinars. In 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about brain injuries and bicycle pedestrian activities, and specifically what does a brain injury look like? I think there's a lot of misconceptions there, or just lack of understanding. Concussions to really traumatic brain injuries that approach fatality. And what a cardiovascular activity like cycling can really do to help people who survive traumatic brain injuries thrive, how it can help them thrive and recover and live a good life. And then after that, we're doing bicycling in Tanzania. And we actually have one of our bike ped instructors in Tanzania. She's been there for a few months. She's coming back and she wants to share everything that she's learned in Tanzania. It's a really incredible story that she's going to be sharing. We got one after that, which I now am going to be part of in more ways than one, because today my bike cracked. And so I went online right away. I was like, I wonder if I can find a bike to replace this. And lo and behold, it's pretty darn difficult. So we're going to be talking about how do you get a bike this day and age when it's so hard, when inventory in bike shops is so depleted. Buying and selling used bikes. Good opportunity to find bikes in the used marketplace. And then in no particular order, coming up in May and June, we're going to be talking with a physical fitness specialist. Specifically, we're going to discuss stretching and different conditioning techniques to make us more comfortable, stronger on the bike. And after that, Global Road Safety Week is coming up. There's been a lot of press over the years and spotlighting on crashes that take place involving bicycles and pedestrians. And sometimes it's done well and sometimes it's not done well. And what can we do to just change the way that the news and the way that we perceive these crashes, and that way we can respond to them and make it safer for everyone. E-bikes, that's another one coming up. Electric assist bicycles, like understanding the different types, using them. Does it take extra maintenance because there's a battery and a motor? And how do we use these properly? What's the etiquette? And upper extremity injuries. So a lot of us are familiar with carpal tunnel syndrome, for instance. But also there's a lot of shoulder injuries and a lot of things like this that occupational therapists actually see with cyclists. So what can we do to help those situations and make them better? All things coming up. So if you're not on our mailing list already, please get on. Feel free to email me later and I can help you do that if necessary. If you want to find out exactly how to register for these, you can also go to our webpage, bikemaine.org, click on events and then calendar, and you'll see them all there. And if you're not already a supporting member of Bike Maine, we would appreciate it if you would want to become one. We are a member-based nonprofit organization. And finally, one more plug in here, the women's ride's coming up. So we used to host a women's ride in the state of Maine, and we took a hiatus from that for several reasons, which I'm not going to get into tonight. But right in line with what we're going to talk about tonight is the women's ride. And this year specifically, we're going to need a lot of people that might want to be a ride leader for small groups to go out on this statewide day on June 5th. So if you have any interest, go to bikemaine.org/women's ride, and you can sign up there to become a ride leader in any place that you would like to do so. So without further ado, let's introduce ourselves. I'm going to stop sharing the screen. My name is Eric De Silva, and I am the Education Program Manager at the Bicycle Coalition of Maine. And as an aside, I also do some different things like these Wednesday webinars. And these are some of the most exciting things that I think we're doing this year, because there's such a huge variety, as you've seen, of things that we're going to be covering. And with me, my co-host tonight is Scott Workman, and Scott used to live in Waterville, and some of the first slow rides that I became aware of were rides that Scott actually put together. Scott, would you like to mention anything else about yourself? And you are muted still.
Thanks. I do a lot of talking to myself whenever I don't unmute. So that's the nature of Zoom, I think. Hi, everybody. I lived in Maine for about 5 years and moved to New York. I live in the Hudson River Valley now in the town of Kingston. And we had a great ride series down in Waterville. And it was very successful. It went for, about 4 years. And I think some other people have revived that spirit and are doing some rides, but not in as organized of a way. I think that hopefully somebody from Waterville is on the call tonight, and I'd be happy to talk to you about the town and great routes and stuff like that. But I took that with me whenever I moved to Kingston, and we have a group called Bike Friendly Kingston. And I moved here at a great time for bicycling because two bike shops opened the year that I moved here. They knew I was going to spend some money on bike parts. And so they yeah, and there were a couple of trails that were being developed in town, and so it was a good time to be here and start up some rides as well. And I'm really looking forward to talking to you about those tonight. Um,
Thanks, Scott, for being present. So let's kick it off really quick. It's helpful for both Scott and I to know a little bit about our audience. So there's a poll that just popped up on all your screens. Just really quickly, how old are you? That way we can sort of tailor the ride a little bit more specifically if possible. Tailor the conversation, not the ride. Getting ahead of myself.
Oop.
I'm going to close the poll in 3, 2, 1. All right, so there, all of you can see the results of that one. So that's a good spread. Maybe I should have cut it down a little bit narrower, but. And then one more similar one, just so we can have an idea again. This one is, just let us know in what part of Maine you're hoping to join or form a group ride in, as best as you can. I was going to put counties here, but there's way too many counties in Maine, and it's really hard to figure out where those things are. But give us an idea of whereabouts you're hoping to join or put stuff together. A lot in southern Maine. That's not a surprise, though. That's where most of our population is. All right, closing the raw, and here's the results of that one for everyone to kind of check out quickly. So we're lacking a lot in northern Maine. And actually, northern Maine is a beautiful place. So if you haven't been there before, really advocate going. Same with the Western Mountains. Both places that I don't live in northern Maine or the Western Mountains, but I love traveling there for bike rides. So maybe after this is said and done, you can actually find a group ride that is good to join in those parts. So then, well, without further ado, we're going to break this into two parts. And the first part is going to be, how do you join a ride? And so, like all of us, this is sort of like a project. So before you work on your project, you got to do a little homework. And the better you do that, the more pleasant that group ride you join will be. So we'll talk about joining a group ride. And then later on, we'll talk about leading a group ride. And there's a lot of parts to both of them that I think are much, as I worked on this with Scott, it became very apparent to me that there's a lot more to this than I actually initially thought. And then just a quick note that we are in the pandemic still. So whether you're leading a ride or starting or joining a ride, keep in mind that there's going to be certain precautions wherever you are. The general best practices that I've heard and the way that we speak to people is that smaller groups are usually better right now. If you are going to be with a group of people, keep yourself about 3 bike lengths apart as you're riding. 6 feet's fine when there's no air movement, but when you're in someone's draft, that 6 feet can be extended. So 3 bike lengths is the best practice. Have a mask ready to put on when you get closer or when you're passing people going the other direction. And especially when you're queuing up the beginning of a ride or where you're stopping at the end of the ride or mid-ride, just be aware that when you clump together in a group, that could be something that isn't really safe. But regardless of what you do, just make sure you're comfortable, check the current guidelines as well. So why do we want to talk about group rides in the first place? And Scott, jump in anytime. But I think one of the best things about group rides is that this is a good way to meet people, build community, and learn about the physical community and the environment. roads, trails, woods, hidden little nooks and crannies, passageways. What do you think, Scott?
I think that one of the great things is that with cycling, I think you create instant community whenever you ride a bicycle. Usually people who ride bikes are interested in, they're interested in being healthy. They're interested in going out and exploring. They're interested in, the environment. I mean, there's a lot of things that pull people into cycling, and you can kind of easily jump into, if you start to ride with people, that becomes your tribe, a lot of times. And so it's really a instant community. That's been my experience in both Waterville and in Kingston, New York. I still hang out with people from Waterville who ride bikes. As a matter of fact, that's the only people I know in Waterville, is people that I used to ride bikes with. And so that community is really strong once you kind of go out and do adventures with people. So that's my thought on that.
Yeah, so I like group rides a lot. Solo rides are really fun too. So I wanted to quickly make sure that we were all a little bit educated about what type of rides actually exist out there. And I don't mean like where the surface conditions necessarily, whether it's a road or mountain bike, but they're like, I'm talking about the pace of the ride. And a lot of times if you're either new to a club or you're talking to a bike shop, and we're going to get into these a little bit later, one of the things that's going to come up is that there's going to be different levels of rides. And so the fastest groups we often would call race pace, or maybe those are the A rides, sometimes they're called. And these are hard, fast rides. The riders often do get dropped, which means they get left behind from where the leaders are. There are usually few, maybe no stops during the ride at all. And the pace, the actual speed that that group is traveling, can be over 20 miles an hour average. So one step below that, we have something called intermediate B rides. These go by different names. I'm just coming up with some of the more generic ones. So these intermediate B rides might be for very fit cyclists. Drops, getting dropped from where the leaders are, it's possible, but regrouping is common because there's chances where that ride will stop and everyone will come back together. Expect a speed of 15 to 20 miles an hour. We're not going to be talking too much about race pace or intermediate B rides during this call. What we are going to focus on are the next two. So we have club and recreational rides, or sometimes they're called C rides. And these are an easier pace, frequent rest stops. You might get dropped temporarily, so the group might separate, maybe one group in the front and another group in the back, but they'll typically all come back together and finish together. 10 to 15 miles an hour is the speed there. And then we have something else, which is in our title, chill rides or slow rolls. And these are no drop at all. There's no pressure on anyone. That this is at least the mission of the ride. Frequent stops. Those stops can be very landmark specific or picnic kind of specific. Very casual. You're not going to see, you may see Lycra, but you may not. You may see drop bars on the road, but you may also see plenty of flat bars on a road ride. And these rides are often under 12 miles an hour. Scott, did I sum that up pretty well in your mind?
You did. I always called our slow rides or slow rolls ice cream social rides, where usually it's ice cream or it's a pint at the end of the ride. And so you kind of frame it as that sort of slow, conversation pace is what I like to call it. I've seen some people put it out there as party pace. Yeah, so party pace. But those are the rides that we're definitely talking about today.
Right. So the next thing that, well, Scott, where do you want to go from here? I can talk about where to find established rides, or we can jump to some of the prereqs, like what should people do before joining a ride or even looking for one?
I think one of the that's a great question. One of the things, I made the mistake one time of joining a club ride in South Carolina. And I used to ride my bike to work quite a bit, and did my errands on a bicycle, but I joined a ride that was an A group ride. And I didn't know anything about group rides. I was like, oh, this sounds like fun. And I got dropped, within the first couple of minutes. And I ended up, turning back around and, going out and doing a different ride, and doing the kind of ride I wanted to do. And I never saw those people again, especially not on the ride. And I think that was probably influential because had moved to Maine soon after, and started the slow roll ride. And so, I found out more about myself and what I was interested in. And that was, going out with friends and having a conversation-based bike ride.
So I guess one of the takeaways from that is know your pace. And
Mhm.
I've actually talked to some folks about this beforehand. And it's really common for people that don't necessarily join group rides on a regular basis to misrepresent themselves. And when we talk about pace, it's you might go 20 miles an hour at one point during your ride, but really knowing how fast are you going to go on average, and how do you want to feel? Do you want to hang out with a group and chit chat and talk about the things that you saw that or see on the side of the road? That's a very casual pace. That's not something that's going to happen very easily in an A race or A ride. But if you're there to train and really push yourself, then maybe you might want that more uh, challenging feeling of a faster ride. So know your body, and also know what level of hurt you're willing to endure. Did you want to say something, Scott?
Yeah, I did. It's also a good idea if you're looking for that group ride is to ask questions and just say, here's what I ride, here's the type of bike that I ride, here's what I would like to do. And sometimes what you envision yourself doing is different from the reality. And so it's good to kind of understand your own physical capabilities. And ask people like, how fast do you go? If I'm not if I'm not a fast bike rider, would I be dropped? And people who organize these rides, they want people to be into cycling. They just want to have a fast ride sometimes. And so it's good to get those questions out of the way instead of showing up, ready, with a clunker bike at the roadie ride. And so, yeah, I would recommend ask questions ahead of time, in this day and age. Most of them have websites and they'll tell you how fast they're going. And you can also test how fast you're going by using an app on your phone like Strava or Ride with GPS, and those will record your route. And you can say, okay, how fast am I going on this ride?
Yeah, you can almost think of it like an interview. Before you might be thinking of will I fit in, but you can ask them, will I fit in too? So interview the ride leaders or the bike shop or the club leader, whatever it is. And there's some other notes I made here too. Um, Figure out, like, if you're joining a club and it starts and it says 5 p.m. at this parking lot, does that mean they're leaving and starting to pedal exactly at 5 p.m.? And because if you show up at 5:05, they're going to be gone. Or do they show up at 5 p.m. and then sort of hang out and leave at 5:15? So one thing that you might want to just check on before going for this. Another thing that can be common too, showing up with a bike that needs some sort of repair. So you show up and you're hoping someone's going to fix your bike, or you need to fix it because you just pulled it out and you realize the tires are flat, but you threw it on the car and you drove to wherever you're going. You pull it off and you're asking everyone to wait while you pump up the tires. So those types of things. So it might be that the group is so casual, and that's fine. And maybe that's even the expectation that you show up and everyone does a little bit of air, brakes, chain, quick learning together. And that can be a great educational experience. Or it might be that people could be irritated that they're waiting for you. And then know what are people riding on these rides. If it's a trail ride, then you should have a mountain bike. If it's a road ride, then you might want to have a road bike, but you might not need to. Or maybe there's some gravel parts mixed in, and if you show up with tires that are really narrow, you can be really uncomfortable. So again, that interview process with the ride leader can be really important. Let's quickly go into finding some of these rides. So I did a little bit, I put a couple slides together, not a lot, but I do want to, let me pull it up. There it is. So this is a slide from our webpage. So again, go to bikemain.org, and then you can click on, I labeled it right here. Number 1, click on About at the top, and then 2, Partners, and then 3, you can click on Bike Clubs over on the left sidebar. There's a whole list of bike clubs that at least the Bicycle Coalition of Maine is familiar with, and you can go to their website. Some of them have really very content-filled websites that show you where the rides are and when they are, and it gives you descriptions of them. And other times it's much more low key. It's more of like a grassroots thing, and you just kind of wait and find out based on a Facebook post. But they're all there, the ones that we're familiar with. I encourage you to reach out to them if you're interested in joining a ride, or if you're interested in becoming a ride leader. Another great resource is our bike shops. And so there's a lot more bike shops in the state than there are club rides.
Another great resource is there's a lot more
So
club rides.
we have one person that's making some.
So the one person.
I'm going to mute everyone really quickly, just so we don't have that feedback. Oh, someone took care of it. So if you go to our website, bikemain.org, and go to Where to Ride, which is our Where to Find Ride platform, you can actually turn on a map where all the bike shops are shown, and you can click on one of those bike shop symbols, and then all the contact information is there. And ask them, like most bike shops that I am familiar with have at least one. Many of them have multiple rides during the week, some even multiple on any given day. They'll do a women's ride, and they'll do a men's ride. They'll do co-ed rides. They'll do slow rides, fast rides, long rides, short rides. So reach out to a local bike shop. It's a great way to form a relationship with them, and also to get to know that area. And just for fun, I did a little searching for some of the areas that don't necessarily have a lot of bike shops or a lot of known clubs. So here's a list of 4, sort of random. I'm not trying to boost them at all, but I do think they're all pretty cool. In Millinocket, you can look up the Katahdin Area Trails group, and they do a lot of mountain bike stuff. They probably do a lot of gravel stuff too. They do some trail building. It's a pretty cool group. And they do rides, of course. In down East Maine, there's a new group that started last year, Passamaquoddy Bike Club, and they meet at Boyden Lake in Perry, Maine. If you're interested in getting in touch with them, shoot me an email later, and I'll get you in touch with the ride leader. In Unity, which is kind of where the MOFGA is, and just outside of Waterville, actually, there's an organization called Rail Cycles, and they actually take machines like tricycle things that go on the railroad tracks, and you pedal them with a couple friends down the railroad tracks and back. It's a pretty cool little interesting, I guess, thing that most of us probably haven't done. Way up north in the Aroostook County, there's a Facebook group. It's called County Rides and Strides, and this is a really fun, active group. Sometimes it's about, I'm going to go hike Mars Hill, but a lot of times it's, I'm going to go mountain bike at the Nordic Heritage trail system. I'm going to go for a road ride up near Fort Kent. Does anyone want to join? And so we're going to talk about that type of group ride a little bit later too. Let's stop the sharing. And for anyone that doesn't feel super comfortable with the idea of going on a group ride, maybe you feel like you need a little bit more confidence building first, but reach out to the Bicycle Coalition of Maine too, because we do offer a lot of free education for youth and adults that goes everything through safety, driving your bicycle vehicularly with traffic, busy streets or rural streets, mountain biking. So we'll go through how to fix a flat tire or other roadside repairs. There's a large variety, but we do a lot of education. We really enjoy doing it. Reach out if you would like to receive any of that. So I haven't been doing a lot of reading of the chat, but it looks like there's no questions so far regarding joining a group ride. Is there anything else we should add, Scott, before talking about leading a group ride?
Scott, you're muted.
Sorry, thanks, John. So No, I don't think so. I think we've covered like joining a ride. That looks, it sounds great what we've talked about so far.
Well, let's talk about creating a group ride, maybe either leading one that exists
Okay.
or starting one. Do you want to kind of take this one, John? I mean, sorry, Scott.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. So in Waterville, we had a really fun group of people that got together and rode bikes. We designated a day. I moved to town and I wanted to have this sort of community. And I reached out to a couple of different organizations. One of them was Inland Hospital. There was a person there, Ellen Wells. I don't know if she's somebody that you all are familiar with, but she's heavily involved in active communities. And I also reached out to Peter Garrett of the Messalonsky Trails organization, Kennebec Messalonsky Trails. And we decided to form kind of a small group that would put on these rides. And the intent was to get more people doing things, active things, specifically around bicycling. And we had this great trail organization that was building trails, and we wanted a way to get people into using those resources. And so, the first thing that we did was like, let's start up a group ride. And we I think the first group ride we had 2 people. It was great. We went on a bike ride, and we decided, wow, we should organize this and really try to pull people into it, because we know that there's a latent need for somebody to organize this. There are a lot of people who want to ride a bike, but they're afraid. They're afraid of, what if I get lost? What if I run into bad traffic? And if you have a organization that puts on a ride, and takes it slow and works to build people's confidence in riding, that they're going to have a lot of fun, and they're going to become bike riders, and they're going to use the resources. And we all know that more bicyclists make it safe for more bicyclists. Biking begets biking. Not to get biblical on biking, but and so early on we started this, and it grew into pretty organized. We had a group of ride leaders who would take on the ride. I think in the first year it was typically the person who had started it, which was me. But it evolved over time to where different people would pick out rides that they wanted to do. And one of the things that I think is really, really important, and I think we talked about it here, is knowing the group's intentions. We talked about that whenever you're wanting to join a ride, but letting people know your intentions as a group ride is equally important, because people come to a group ride and they're expecting, I think a lot of times people have an impression of cyclists as people who are in Lycra and they're riding really fast. And that's often true. And I think that's great. But they also, they want to ride a bicycle, but they want to use it for transportation or fun, or, just something casual to do with their family. And so one of the key things was advertising these rides to people who are interested as a casual ride, and really letting people know that we're not going to drop you. We're not going to, we're not going to leave you at, this terrible intersection or lost in the woods. And we're really going to focus on making sure that you have a good time safely. And so I think we did a good job of really clarifying what it was that we were trying to do there. And we did have people that showed up, in Lycra. They had a race bike and they were just, ready to go. And they quickly learned that, they were at the wrong ride, and it was okay. We gave them some resources and sent them over to, the Kennebec Valley Bicycle Club, and, showed them to some different resources for some of the faster club rides. And I think that was good. So one of the things that came up early on with bicycling is that there is a little bit of liability involved. Whenever you lead a club ride or a group ride, you're kind of signing yourself up to take care of people, and it's a questionable legal boundary between who's responsible for their safety. And so one of the things that we've done in Kingston, New York, and in Waterville was work with a parent organization that has event insurance, because you want to make sure that you as a ride leader are you're there to help facilitate that ride. You're here to organize it. You can't be responsible for the safety of others whenever they, are independent creatures, right? And you can't be responsible for cars and their behaviors. And so you need to be able to protect yourself a little bit. So what we did was we established a sign up, just a clause that says, there's probably an attorney that could describe this a little bit better, but, something that, places the responsibility on the rider and that they understand that. We also got event insurance through the parent organization, which they did that, for us for free because they had the resources to do it. The group rides were not something that we charged for. And so I think that was early on, that was a really good idea. I'm sure we went on some group rides that did not have that, but we won't talk about that. But my recommendation is always to, make sure you include that. Whenever you're creating these group rides, so communication is really important. We had a weekly blast of email that we would shoot out to everybody. And what we would do is we define the route. We'd talk about, what the expectation is, when we're going to meet. We would, say the ride leaves at 6 o'clock, plan to be there. If you get there early, we'll bring a pump and some tools and help you out because, time is limited. You need to have, people need to be able to before dark, especially in Maine, it gets dark really early there. And so we made sure that we always had people, resources and people there early to be able to fix bikes, put air in tires. And sometimes we had to turn people away, who brought a bike that hadn't been ridden in 10 years and had rubber that was, brittle and turned into dust the minute they sat on the bike. And that's unfortunate, but, you have to kind of be able to deal with that and say, we'd like to have this ride. I'm sorry that your bike doesn't work. And so you kind of have to be firm with that or else you're going to hold up everybody's fun. And most people understand that. It wasn't like there was any question about that. The other thing, is that designing a route. Routes are really important. And I like to use Strava. I tend to be a Strava kind of guy. There's
Can you
other.
explain what Strava is quickly?
Yeah, I'm going to get into. I'm going to list off a couple different ones, and then I'm going to get into what they do. But there's Ride with GPS. There's Strava, and there's all kinds of resources that you can use on a computer or your phone, and you can build a route based on places that you think are good routes to ride. And you can, build that route ahead of time and you can email it to people. You can take a, screenshot of that route. And you can also send the route to people so that if they're using Strava, they can actually turn that route on and do turn-by-turn navigation, using the different resources, Ride with GPS, Strava. I'm sure there's a ton of other ones that we could get into, later on or, with some follow-up questions. But you define the route ahead of time. And one of my recommendations is always know that route. If you're going to lead the ride, go do the ride, beforehand. Because sometimes you'll think of a ride, in a route that you're like, oh, that'll be a great place to ride. And often it's not so good. Or there's special circumstances, where you just really have to we really have to know what you're getting into, and you have to know how you're going to approach that intersection. And those are teachable moments where you can really get into, here we're crossing a railroad track and it is at a 45-degree offset as opposed to a 90-degree, perpendicular offset. And you can say, let's stop right here. And let's have a teachable moment, because I don't know if anybody's done this, but if you get caught in a railroad track, you pretty much fall over. And so that's a great learning opportunity for everybody, and so that they don't have to fall off their bike like I did. And so take advantage of those, especially around group rides. Especially around group rides. So routing is important. Know the route that you're going to take people on. Have it kind of in your head. Unless you're going out with a confident group of riders, tend to make sure that you're bringing them to a place that they can trust and build their confidence in riding. I like to focus on neighborhoods. I like to focus on, old country roads. I love country roads. I like rail trails. Um, and this goes into your communication. If you're going to be going on like dirt roads or rail trails, or even some, really gentle single track, make sure you let people know that you're actually going to be on single track, and that they can expect to need a tire that's, bigger than a 32 millimeter tire. They're going to need something that's, 40 millimeters or an inch and a quarter or inch and a half for a more comfortable ride. So, preface those things ahead of time so that people don't, get stuck because that's no fun. If you have to turn around and, you run into a trail that's rooty and rocky and you didn't expect it. Yeah. So one other suggestion is BCM's where to ride routes that I think you're going to get into, Eric.
Yeah, I can throw that back up again. Or actually, we looked at it
Yeah.
already, but we had that.
Okay, we looked at it already.
We had that. We have a. I'll put it up back up one more time. It's a really cool resource. So here's the slide again. But again, if you go to where to ride, this is where you can see where all the bike shops are. But you can also click on any one of those little squiggly loops on there, and you can. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't share it yet. There we go.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, so it's all right. But so you can click on any one of them and actually get the statistics for that specific ride, how long it is, how hilly it is, and there's usually a description, like a written description. But if you're looking for a place to take a group, this might be a good way to find some ones in your area, or maybe even it's a travel to ride sort of event. But most of these, or all of these rides have been curated by one person or department or another, and they're all really fantastic. So definitely a good resource.
Mhm. Another factor is fitness level. I live in Kingston, and it's at the foothills of the Catskills. It's right on the Hudson, and I know that Maine is. I've never found a flat route in Maine. I don't think. And so consider the audience that you're going to be riding with and the fitness level, because hills, for somebody who has never ridden a bike or doesn't ride a bike, hills are, they're daunting. And they require some fitness level to get up and over. So always make sure that you're considering that. You don't want to take somebody up at 8% grade if it's their first time riding. They're not going to have fun. They're going to be uncomfortable, and it's going to be a tough ride. The other good consideration for planning routes is places to wait and get people back together. These are no drop bike rides, but inevitably sometimes people do get dropped. And you need to have a place, that you can stop a few times and people can catch up, have a drink of water, and take a break. I always like to use historic markers. We always had these great, along the Kennebec River, there were always some beautiful places to stop, and, they had these little scenic vistas or places to pull off and just catch everybody up. You could always sit down and have a conversation or a snack. And so it was always really nice there. And again, I like to focus on neighborhood streets, trails, and country roads, because those are where people can really get confident in bike riding. I think that you don't want to bring people out on busy infrastructure on their first day on the cycle. So, and then I want to talk a little bit about marketing the rides. We spend a lot of time. Do you mind if I share my screen?
No, please do.
Okay. So let me know whenever you can see my screen.
It's up.
Okay. So what I would do is often for these rides, I would let people know what's going on. I would let people know where we're going to ride, what time we're going to leave, leaving from the Waterville Farmers Market. I'd put down a ride leader. And then, I'd often put in some other news about cycling so that people could have some other context to cycling. But this was always important because it gave people a sense of where they were going to head on their bike route and how long they were going to be. This has mile markers, and this is just a Google mapping tool. I'm not even sure. I think it's called GMAP Speedometer, and allows you to click by click through a a street network and just create a quick map and then take a screenshot of it. And then, yeah, I would throw in some other news. Bike repair business that's just starting up, all kinds of little tidbits for people. And let me bring up one other one. Well, there we go. So, and often I would talk about where the bike route was going, taking us to the agrarian heart of central Maine. Conversation-paced ride. We will go at the pace of the slowest rider. So people knew what to expect from these rides. And I think that's always really important. I think we got a little bit more sophisticated as time went on. We would talk about bringing a bike, a helmet, a couple bucks for the flavor of the week ice cream. And yeah, so we always wanted to let people know what they need to bring. And yeah, so.
Hey, Scott, one of the questions that came up earlier regarding leading a ride was, and I answered it, but what parent organizations out there can actually provide a coverage, an insurance coverage? So I suggested YMCA's, healthy town community organizations, adult ed, parks and rec departments, maybe even like a local land trust.
Yeah.
Is that on the right line of thinking?
That's exactly on the right track. I think that most organizations that know about insurance, and as long as you let them know what events you're going to be hosting, they can cover you for those events. It has to be announced ahead of time. So if you have a Thursday night, bike ride, just let the event insurance company know we have events on Thursday nights. The insurance is not expensive, but and yeah. I think in Kingston, it's covered by a land trust that's not even in the same town. I'm not sure the connection. And in Waterville, I believe it was covered by maybe the Messalonsky Trails organization, but maybe through, might have even been through like KVCOG or something. Because there was all these very nebulous, planning and healthy communities organizations out there. So it may have been through like the Council of Governments. So check around for sure. And don't hesitate to ask people like, somebody from the YMCA and say, we do this and this aligns with your goals. Let them know, we're looking for, to teach people how to ride bikes. And typically they will be responsive to that or help you find those resources.
Yeah, we have someone else, it was a direct message, but they are a registered Maine guide. So you might want to, if you are a guide already, or maybe you teach yoga, etc., it's possible that your insurance liability umbrella might cover cycling, but I would recommend calling your insurance people to confirm that. If you're going to connect with an existing club, a lot of those clubs have club dues in order to actually provide ride coverage. So a lot of the larger clubs will protect the leader already. And then there's some other comments that came in just to make sure everyone hears this. So we talked a lot about ride leaders, but the ride sweep is actually just as critical. That's also a ride leader. You got the engine, you got the caboose, and it's a pair. And the ride sweep is there just to make sure that the slowest person isn't left behind, isn't lost, that the group can kind of maintain cohesiveness. And as a ride leader, and this is a specific kind of ride where you're really going to support people, you might want to bring extra stuff, extra water, extra inner tubes, be prepared to help someone on the ride. And again, it's a really supportive environment that some club rides, some group rides will actually include.
Yeah, tools, tools and tubes.
And phone numbers. So that's a great one too. Thanks everyone for those comments. But if you're a ride leader and you want to make sure that if someone gets separated from the group, that they can reach you, then giving them your phone number ahead of time is going to make that possible. Well, what else? So we talked about spread. Did we talk about marketing the ride?
Yeah, we talked about marketing
the
the ride.
emails.
But I had a few additional thoughts about that, Eric. one of the things that we've done in Waterville is, usually hospitals will put on like a health fair. And so if you wanted to market your ride, that's a really good place to let people know, booth at a health fair and bring some materials. And I believe that if you're kind of an organized group, the Bike Coalition provides materials sometimes. I don't know, I'm sure that's still the case.
It is.
Yeah. And so, pamphlets on safety and, events and things like that, pins. I used to bring a whole bunch of, cleaning products and, give away like little Pedro's chain cleaners to people. And so any of those things can kind of get people's attention and allow you to start a conversation with people. One of the great places to booth or have a table is at a farmer's market, and let people know what you do. Because you've got a bunch of people who are milling around and they're having a good time and they would love to talk about things that they like.
And you can certainly also contact us at the Bicycle Coalition of Maine. We have that events calendar that shows these webinars, but we can also put your event on your group ride on that event calendar as well to really share with a larger audience what you would like to share. We covered a lot there. But I do have a couple more polls that I'm interested. Now that we've talked about riding, leading versus joining, or really both, I'm curious to know how many of you attended this webinar because you were interested in joining a ride versus how many of you were interested in leading them, or both, really. It's pretty neck and neck right now. Give it a couple more moments here. All right, closing in 3, 2, 1. All right, so it looks like the majority are joining a ride, but not by much. Looks like we have a lot of people that might want to lead a ride and then a lot of people that want to do both. Awesome. There's one more. We talked, I think, a lot of like the, maybe what we're talking about is going on road rides, but we could be totally wrong. So when we're talking about group rides and where you want to ride, what type of surface are you interested in riding on? Paved road rides, gravel, dirt road rides, bike, multi-use paths away from any motor vehicle traffic, or at least cars and trucks? Or are we talking about mountain bike trail riding? This is actually a pretty interesting result that's coming up. I'm going to end the poll. I'll share these results as well with everyone. So majority on paved road rides, as I expected, but I didn't expect that bike and multi-use paths would be so close in second place. Gravel dirt road rides and mountain bike trail riding, I expected those to be sort of third and fourth. Those, in my experience, gravel dirt road rides can be disconcerting for some people to think about because the terrain, the surface is granular, it's dynamic, it's moving around beneath the tires. But such a nice, wonderful thing about gravel dirt rides is that they really lack motor vehicle traffic, and the speeds are going to be slow, and it's a very pleasant environment where people can ride 2 abreast or 3 abreast and not have to worry about cars queuing up behind the group or cars coming very fast in the opposite direction. I really enjoy gravel dirt road rides for that reason. Just it's a very quiet ride where you can just appreciate the bicycle so much. Sure, stop that one. And then the last one here, we talked a lot about how do you stay on track and how do we share where we're going to be riding. And if you're on a route, one thing that you can do if you're on a group ride and you're a leader, you can provide the map. This is not something that was so easily done 10 years ago, but now most of our smartphones can run an app that can then lead us along the road so we don't get lost, and even give us turn-by-turn directions. Some of us have GPS cycle computers. Some of us might still use printed cue sheets so we don't get lost. So Ride leaders can provide this information. And if you're joining a ride, you can ask the ride leader, hey, do you have a cue sheet, a printed list of all the turns? Or do you have the track, the digital track that I can put on my phone or on my digital GPS device that attaches to my handlebar? So very quickly, how do you navigate when you're riding in a new area? Or how would you expect other people to navigate? You can rely on following someone else. That would really be the dynamics within the heart of a group ride. You use a navigation app or some other GPS device. To rely on a more traditional printed cue sheet and printed map. Do you wing it? The last one there is, do you just like getting lost? I don't worry about staying on rail and then enjoy being lost. And honestly, that's how I feel sometimes. I like to just go out there and explore. And then you find yourself in a place that where you don't even know where you are anymore. And it's such a nice feeling, as long as you're not needed somewhere else, that is. So I'm going to end that poll. Majority of you are using new digital devices. And second, right, not too far back, is using those traditional printed cue sheets and printed maps. So most of we use Ride with GPS that's the platform that we have beneath our Where to Ride platform, which is where all the routes that I've curated are in. And so that provides like both of those things. You can print maps, you can print the cue sheet, or you can download the file onto your phone. I didn't share those results, I'm sorry. There you go, for everyone to see. I like the 3 people that like to get lost. Wherever you are, kudos. All right, well, let me see if there's any new questions that I might have missed, but if anyone has a question, please feel free to unmute yourself. Scott, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So another thing that's worth talking about, I think, Eric, is there are sometimes, forming a ride and leading it can be kind of intimidating. And an alternative to that is to actually find people who you want to ride with and set up a regular weekly or every other week thing where you go out and you just do a ride, and you find somebody with your the same kind of riding style that you want to do. You will gather people into that ride. I know that we've kind of formed a lot of different rides in the past, but we have a little Sunday morning ride that we do, and it leaves at a bike shop, and it was just a couple of us early on, and now that ride can get 10 to 15 people, and it gets kind of rowdy. But it started out with just a couple of friends, and that sometimes is the easiest way, because and just be open to people who come by and say, wow, what are you guys doing? It looks like fun. Just be open to talking to them about what you do and where you like to ride. And next thing you know, you'll have some new ride partners to go out on these. So don't discount the idea of having something that's a little bit less formal, and just go it on your own and just enjoy riding with friends. That's kind of the first step to a group ride sometimes, is just to have a bike ride.
I'm going to share this last screen. This is our contact information. If you want to get in touch with myself or Scott, feel free to reach out through email. And we're going to stick around a little bit longer if there's more questions, and there are some in the chat. There was a question about triathlon bikes in group rides. And so triathlon bikes are the bikes you might have seen where you actually rest your handlebar on the handlebars like this with your arms forward, very aerodynamic position, sometimes used also in time trials. And those often aren't allowed in group rides. And I've never owned a triathlon bike, so I've never had to like figure out why I can't bring one to a group ride. Do you know, Scott? I'm assuming it's because of the type of handlebar that it's less.
I know that the bike across Maine doesn't allow them. And I only know this because I had a friend who that was the only bike he had, and he wanted to do the bike ride, and he was talking about it. I can only guess that you may fall asleep while riding it.
I don't know. I know
Totally.
a lot of them might have like they have those deep section or disc wheels, or the frame is very aerodynamic in a straight direction, but a side wind can push it around. So it might be the type of ride you're doing is really probably going to dictate whether you can or can't take a bike like that. I would think that the A and B rides, the very fast or next fastest, might say no because they're not safe to use in a cluster in a pack.
Yeah.
But I would think that on the casual ride that a bike like that wouldn't be an issue. Also, there was a comment about e-bikes, electric assist bikes. And so this might be a very particular thing with a specific group, but most of the rides that Scott and I discussed today are going to welcome people on e-bikes. E-bikes, we're going to actually do that webinar in a couple months, but e-bikes are a great way to add accessibility for a broad variety of people with different physical strengths. So even if it's a pair, like a couple, a married couple, and one person's going to ride very fast and the other person is not, and that creates this sort of stress between them. You can put one person on an e-bike and then they can ride at the same pace. So e-bikes have a really great place in riding with others, I think, as well. Someone else asked about getting to the group rides page. So I'll quickly go back to that slide. So again, for that individual, if you go to our website, bikemain.org, and that's the URL right there at the top, and then a number, then 123, click on About at the top, and then there's going to be a little drop down window that comes up, and then it's going to say Partners. Click on Partners, and then over on the sidebar, you can click on Bike Clubs, and you get the whole list of bike clubs there. You can also email me at eric@bikemain.org, and I can get that for you. Yes, Scott. Scott, did you want to add something?
Yeah, somebody brought up a really good point, Richard Cobb, and this is something I neglected to mention. We do often have if there are new people at the group rides, we do have kind of a discussion of safety at the beginning of a ride, and I think that's really important. I think that early on you have to establish that we're not going to run stop signs. We're not going to we're going to signal whenever we go places. You establish what those hand signals are, and you also talk about some of the cues that you can give your fellow riders. Like, hey, cars passing, and things like that, and letting people know what to expect. And so a little bit of training, especially whenever you have new riders on the bike ride, is very handy. And I think that's a really good idea. Thanks for pointing that out, Richard.
Yeah, debris on the road too, just to make sure that there's a pothole coming up, or car doors, people parked on the side of the road, move away from those parallel parked cars so you don't get a door. A couple more questions about trikes or three-wheeled bicycles. Again, I think this is very, very specific to the type of group you're going to join. I think in some of the rides that Scott led in Waterville, those casual rides, the chill rides, someone on a trike would be welcome. Would that be correct to assume, Scott?
Typically, yeah, unless you have some elevation. I think a trike is kind of tough to get up, uphill. But whenever it's a flat route, I think that trikes are a-okay. If somebody were to come on that bike ride, I would want, and ask if the trike was fine. I would want to preface it by saying, here's what we're going to experience during this ride. We're going to go up this hill and this hill. Do you feel comfortable going up that? And so I think you have to just be really clear about it, because trikes are tougher to ride. They require a little bit more energy, a little bit more power. Whenever the elevation changes.
Yeah, you can't get your body weight up on the pedals like you can stand up on a conventional bicycle and really push down. Exactly. Another question about best tire size for gravel and dirt. So tires come in different diameters, but the width makes a big difference, the width of the tire. And so the tires are often measured either in imperial or metric. It's crazy that we still have such like this thing going on. But if you're on a mountain bike, it's probably measured in imperial units, and you're unlikely to have something below 2 inches, which would be fine. If you're on a road bike or a gravel bike or a cyclocross bike or a hybrid bike, you probably have metric units on the side of your tire. And I would say that anything over 35 millimeters wide is a good kind of medium. You can get like on pavement comfortably. You can go on some smooth gravel comfortably. That said, people can ride on very narrow tires on gravel roads, and that people do the Paris-Roubaix, which is a very famous race on the most gnarled roads on cobblestones in France. And those are terrible roads, and they're riding on narrow road tires. So it just takes a lot of expertise to avoid every single thing that could destroy your tire, wheel, tube, your body. So the bigger your tire, the more comfortable you're going to be, and the less you have to worry about the little things that might give you a mechanical failure.
Eric, we had somebody with their hand up at one point.
Yeah, is that person still here? Maybe they took off, or maybe we answered their question. Well, thank you everyone for attending. And like I said, reach out if you have any additional questions, and hopefully we get to see you in 2 weeks when we do our next Wednesday webinar. Thank you, Scott, for co-hosting with me.
Hey, thank you for letting me do this. This was fun. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Yeah, good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. I'm going to sign off too.
All right, see you later, Eric.
Okay.